हरि ओम सहनावतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। समस्त जन कल्याणी निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ॐ श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योगात् करोति प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलि प्राञ्जलिना स्तोष्मि। अबाहुपुरुषाकार शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम्। Hari Om. With the Lord and Gurudeva's blessing, we will be trying to learn something about one darshana amongst the 6 darshanas, but the darshana which has immense practical value. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa. These are the Shad darshanas. Darshanas are studied after the Prasthanatrayi is studied. The reason being, the Upanishads or the Vedanta, which is called Shruti Prasthana, because it is the revealed knowledge, the first Upadesha comes from Upanishad. The precise orientation of what is what and where comes from Upanishad. Because Upanishads are the revealed divine utterances, they are many times Saravat. So in order to dispel the doubts about the words that are expressed in Upanishad, we need a logical or yukti prasthana called Nyaya Prasthana, which is Brahma Sutra, which is logical exposition of Upanishad. And once both are done, then the Sadhana Prasthana, which is Bhagavad Gita, which is also called as Smruti Prasthana, is studied. After studying all this, then in order to have the introduction to the direct essence of the philosophy that is expounded in all the Prasthantrayis, darshanas come into the picture. The darshana can be very simply stated as Veda Nishtokta Tattva Pradarsanartha Tattvajnana, that which talks about the philosophy having full faith in Vedas. And these 6 rishis, the Gautama, the Kanada, the Kapila Muni, the Jaimini Muni, Patanjali, and Badarayana Rishi, they have given us the 6 darshanas. Out of these 6 darshanas, we will see that 4 darshanas are purely philosophical or theoretical in nature. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Uttara Mimamsa, they are philosophical expositions. While Purva Mimamsa and Yoga, these are the only 2 darshanas where there is a lot of action, karma, action, kriya to be done. And if we see little carefully, the Purva Mimamsa is talking about the Bahya Kruti, the rituals, the Bahya Kruti, while Yoga is talking about the Antar Kruti. So there is a difference between both are practical in nature, devoted to some action, and not merely philosophical exposition. But the difference is one acts in the external world while one works on the internal world. Both, as well as all the darshanas, are ultimately meant to achieve the same truth, the same destination, the same ending. Ekam satya vipra bahuda vadanti. Truth is one. The knowledgeable people talk in different tongues. Once we know that how darshanas have come and where is the location of yoga darshana, that is why it is yoga darshana, we need to understand how the yoga darshana has developed as well as has become relevant. We all know that by being aware of what is happening around me and my relation to the world, I'm able to conclude certain things. And my conclusions are mostly based by my interaction with the world. So that means me as a Sharira, that is what I consider myself to be. Right or wrong is a different question. But I consider myself as Mr. XYZ, Mrs. XYZ, Miss XYZ, and I interact with the world. For interaction, I require certain instruments so that I can have what is called as constructive interface between the world and myself. I'm not a stone. I'm somebody who is a sentient thing. So I want to interact with the surroundings, which is called Vishwa. So in order to have this, I must approach the Vishwa, the universe, by some means so that the interaction becomes meaningful. And my pods, my feet, my padam with which I hold on to the Vishwa is my Indriyas, are my Indriyas. They are Panch Jnanendriyas and the Manam, which also acts as an Indriya. So these Indriyas are my window to the world. So me as a Jiva, I interact with the Vishwa with the help of my Indriyas, which are my windows through which I see outwards. This entire thing is called Bahir Vishwa. Why Bahir Vishwa? Because there is something called Antar Vishwa. In Bahir Vishwa, we all are expert because we've been dealing only with Bahir Vishwa. So Bahya or Bahir Vishwa, when we interact, these windows called Indriyas, they constantly interact with the contents of the world. The contents could be anything. It could be sentient, insentient, immaterial. Whichever place the Indriyas focus, that person or that interaction brings the information inside to the mind, and we make sense out of that interaction. So making the sense out of that interaction, in other words, the perception that has arisen by interaction is converted into cognition, and then we realize or we name it, name the experience, and also have some effect of that experience on us. The effect could be good or bad. There are only two ways of having that experience. It either pleases me or disappoints me. It is either anukula to me or it is pratikula to me. This much is very easy to understand because that is what our all life is. We may glorify this interaction by giving names like career, beauty, youth, marriage, father. These are Nama Rupa Bheda. These are Bhumika Bheda. We are not interested in that. The very basic structure of our life is we constantly interact with the Bahir Vishwa with the help of the window that is given to me as a jiva, which is Indriyas. But Indriyas alone cannot make sense out of it. So the sense is made in the sixth Indriya or the mind. So that is how mind is the last point where the Bahya Vishwa ends. A very logical corollary to this discussion is that the entire external Vishwa is understood at a point called mind. Reversing the argument, whatever mind perceives is the world. Easy to understand. In other words, what is my Vishwa? Whatever my mind perceives and cognizes. That which it cannot perceive is not my world, which means that the world that I perceive is limited to the capacity of my mind to perceive. So there are two aspects to it. One, either the mind and the Indriyas haven't gone to certain parts of the universe which are totally unknown to us. For example, what is happening inside the deep depths of black hole? I have no idea. My Indriyas haven't gone there. My mind hasn't thought about it. So that means Vishwa in its entirety is never known to me, because the amount of knowledge of universe depends upon the capacity of the mind in terms of its exposure and in terms of its capacity both. When we talk about capacity, we also presuppose that the only way to decipher the universe, to know the universe, is mind. This much is the story of the Bahya Vishwa, or what is called as Jagat. The difference between Jag and Vishwa, Jagat and Vishwa, is Jag is anything that is born or created is Jagat. Vishwa is whatever the Jeev is able to comprehend. There is a subtle difference between the two. This is my universe, this is my Vishwa. That means this much is what my mind can understand. Once we know this, there are certain things that we need to understand. Proposition number one is it that there is the only Vishwa that is existing, or that is something more than that? First one. Second, how many universes Vishwa are there which I am not aware of? Third thing, why should I know that if there is something more than the Vishwa that I know? Fourth thing, if I know that, what will be the benefit to me? Why should I work on that? What is the phalam? Without phalam, without prayojana, if you do anything, it is called unmatta, the mad person. Why will you undertake an exercise when there is no phalam? So in that particular question that we face, we depend on certain category of higher souls who have already undertaken this journey, and for the sake of benefit of people like us asking the question, they have come out with the answer. The answer has come from their own experience, anubhuti, and they are telling it to us, which we study. So for them it is aparoksha jnana. For us, when we study, we get paroksha jnana. And the rishis, these evolved souls, who have seen the universe in entirety, not only Vishwa, Jagat in entirety, had seen something more than the Jagat. That means we are acquainted with part of the manifested world, Vyakta Vishwa. Rishis are acquainted with entire manifested world, one, unmanifested world, two, and what is beyond manifested and unmanifested world, three. When they come and tell us through their utterances as what they saw and what is what type of Vishwa is there, what are the different types of Vishwa that we have, they also tell us what is the phalam of it. And the phalam is very, very simply stated. It is stated in the 7th Adhyaya of Bhagavad Gita, Atma Samyama Yoga or Dhyana Yoga as we call it. It says it absolves you from pain or sorrow and pleasure, both. So a permanent solution to the pain or the sorrow that we suffer is this knowing of Antarvishwa as proposed by the Rishis. That means the Bahya Vishwa and the Antarvishwa. The Rishis tell us there are only two Vishwa. Bahya Vishwa, which we all are aware and we discussed. Antarvishwa is something which we have not even thought of. Less to talk of the experience in that. And the Antarvishwa is far larger and bigger than the Bahya Vishwa. One. Second proposition is these two Vishwas are divided as an arbitrary division. It is not a real division. Why? Because the Antarvishwa and Bahirvishwa, they are in constant consonance with each other. In fact, they are two sides of the same coin. However, the beauty is the Antarvishwa is very, very, very fine. Bahya Vishwa is very, 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 very gross. Those who have read Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda must have heard the connotation in my speech that I am referring to Swamiji every now and then. The Antarvishwa, which is the finer aspect, and moment we say fine, we are not talking only about the micro aspect. A micro particle like proton is the smallest particle, etc. we know. But going for the finalities beyond that, which is ascertainable only by Anubhuti, but cannot be ascertained by any of the Indriyas, because proton, however small it may be, it will be ascertained through some means. In fact, how do they ascertain the subatomic particles is Anuman. Subatomic particles are ascertained by Anumana. They are not Pratyaksha seen, but they are ascertained by Anumana by their movement, the elliptical orbit, the movement, Schrödinger's equation, etc. But finality that we are talking about, Antarvishwa, are further finer than that, which can only be ascertained by Anubhava or Anubhuti, not by Indriyas. And the finer is a causative factor, grosser is the effect, Swamiji says. Now, if this is the case, the phalam is something now the Rishis come forward and tell you that by getting into Antarvishwa, we get knowledge, Jnanam. And what is the purpose of getting the Jnanam? Swami Vivekananda says, Jnanam is the purpose of getting the Jnanam. Why? Because what is the purpose of knowing the sun instead of a ray? To know the source of light. What will happen because of that? everything will be lighted. And then when everything is lighted, then what happens? Everything is known to you. Darkness is dispelled, and darkness is compared to sorrow. So it becomes a completely dvandva rahita, pain and pleasure, good and bad, dvandva rahita ayushya, existence that is devoid of opposites, pair of opposites, dvandva rahita ayushya. And then once you are dvandva rahita, there is no need for embodiment. And since embodiment is not needed, you reach a stage where you are never born, which is nothing else but this sthiti that we already should be in, or we are supposed to be in. Once we know that there is an antar vishwa and there is a bahya vishwa, the beauty is the connecting bridge between the two. Connecting bridge between the two is mind. In other words, mind is a part of bahya vishwa, mind is a part of antar vishwa. The only difference is in bahya vishwa, everything converges and ends in mind, while in antar vishwa, the journey, the pravasa starts from the mind. So mind is a bridge between external world, the world of experiences as it is called. To be more technical, vritti jnana, the experiential world, the world of experience. This includes all saptalokas. Whenever the word lok comes, lokam is experience. So mind is the bridge between manifested or experienced world and the antar vishwa. And then that means we have to cross the bridge of mind to enter from external world to the internal world. And such a complicated philosophy is said by Kabir Maharaj in one simple couplet. Had had jaye har koi. In the external world, everybody goes. Had had jaye har koi, anhad jaye na koi. Anhad, antar vishwa. हद हद जाए हर कोई अनहद जाए ना कोई हद अनहद के बीच में रहा कबीरा सोई. Kabir Maharaj says between these two worlds, one had limited world, anhad unlimited world, or bahya vishwa antar vishwa, there is a bridge called mind wherein Kabira is sitting there. That means it is through his aradhana that we can get into the antar vishwa. Once this is clear to us, it would become clear for us that the Yoga Shastra, which is a darshana, is a science of entering into antar vishwa with the help of mind. So that means the major work that this particular Shastra does is on mind. A method to observe internal world by employing mind in its totality is yoga. As far as yoga word coming from yuja, yuja means yoking or joining, we all are aware of it, all those definitions. We also know that when we say joining, two things are presupposed when you join. The word join itself presupposes two things, one with the other. And the one and the other here is the jiva, which is the limited upadhi, with unlimited, omniscient, omnipresent, vibhur vyapya, Brahma Tattva, which is called Shiva. So jiva Shiva milana, this is the yuja or yoga that is implied in the word yoga, and that is done by many means, many paths. So each Sat path which leads to communion of the soul with the Parabrahman is called yoga. And that being the definition of yoga, the yoga word is attached to that path and the word comes into existence. If this path is achieved by the duty part, karma part, you become a karma yogi or karma yoga. If it is by pure knowledge, jnana yoga. So that is how, if it is by devotion alone, it becomes karma yoga. So we have different types of yogas that are being described, and then some of them are entirely scientific or Vedic in nature, such as karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. And then there are thousands of aberrations made in the modern world, hot yoga and whatnot. Those are all stupidities that we are not going to discuss at all. We also have something like Kriya Yoga, Tantra Yoga, Nada Yoga. Again, these are different paths that are adopted. The commonest are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is something which we are going to study. But these other yogas also intend to achieve and have sanctity. For example, if the focus is on only Shakti part of the Shiva, Shiva and Shakti are inseparable. Shiva is a potential energy, Shakti is the kinetic energy. If Shakti Upasana is done, then with the help of Upasana of Shakti in its feminine form, the Tripura Sundari, the Durga, the Raja Rajeshwari, the Mahalakshmi, the Amba, the Kali, all those are Shaktis. So that Shakti of Shiva, if she is worshipped through the method of some Tantra and Mantra, then it is called as Tantra Yoga. In Kriya Yoga, which is also similar to Patanjali Yoga Shastra, but the focus is on Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. So austerity, spiritual study, and surrender to the Lord, that is Kriya Yoga. There is a Nada Yoga. In fact, there is an Upanishad called Nada Bindu Upanishad. This is focused on worship of Dhvani, Nada, because through the sound, Brahman is approached. The attempt to do that becomes Nada Yoga. So there are many types of yogas, of which our selected focus right now is on a Raja Yoga, which we saw that is nothing else but a method to observe the internal world, Antar Vishwa, by employing mind in its totality. We are again going to come to the definition of yoga in terms of Raja Yoga as we start with the sutras. Another important thing to know about the Raja Yoga is it is partly physical, mostly mental or psychological. This is more important to know because the physical aspect has been given enormous amount of publicity and importance these days. So everybody who prefers to call yoga as yoga, which is not the word is yoga. The yoga has a physical element into it. It has its mulya and maryada. It is considered as important, but the Raja Yoga or the Patanjali Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga as it is called as, because Patanjali's yoga was named as Ashtanga Yoga because it had 8 limbs, 8 important anushasana. So it was called as Ashtanga Yoga. Patanjali Yoga, because it was claimed to have been written by Patanjali, it started being called as Patanjali Yoga, though it is not originally created by Patanjali. In fact, this is said to be originally composed by a Rishi called Hiranyagarbha. Patanjali collected, systemized it, and represented that. That is why it is called as Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga, though he is not the creator of it. In fact, Atha Yoganushasana, that is the first mantra of this particular sutra, the Atha has been basically explained as the collector of the verses. By using the word atha, Patanjali is trying to say that I just collected it. So that is why Patanjali in general is not considered to be the creator, but Patanjali Muni is the one who has, for the first time, collected them, systematized them, and presented it to us. Another important thing about this Patanjali Yoga, which is also called Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga word was coined by Swami Vivekananda after his lectures in America of the book which we all are reading, which is Raja Yoga, although in a very stricter sense. Swamiji, of course, was not only the yogi par excellence. In a stricter sense, the word Raja Yoga has been used earlier. And there the meaning of Raja Yoga was the same Raja Yoga that is meant now. But the word Raja Yoga used by Swamiji was in a reference to give the preeminence of yoga to Ashtanga Yoga. That is why it is king amongst the yogas. That is the way he used it. And that is why most of the orthodox yogis accept Swamiji's Raja Yoga as a word if it means that it is the king of yogas. But to call Ashtanga Yoga the Raja Yoga by some other meaning, they are not prepared. If we see, one of the yoga that always gets confusion in the mind, which is close to Raja Yoga, is Hatha Yoga. In Swamiji's commentary, we will find that Swami Vivekananda has even talked something not very good or almost derogatory about Hatha Yoga. And derogatory not in a negative sense. What he says is, it is an art of making the physical body perfect so that you can live longer. And then he uses a word that even the animals live long. That means he has included Hatha Yoga to a very limited extent, to the extent of physical part of the yoga. And he has also explained, Swamiji, why physical part is so important. We'll come to that a little later. But to understand what is Hatha Yoga itself, if we see, because Hatha Yoga is the yoga that was perfected by none else than the Navanatha yogis, so which are called as Navanathas. The Gorakshanath was the main, not the Pravartaka, but the one who spread the yoga. So the originator of Hatha Yoga is considered to be Shiva himself in the form of Adinatha. So he's called Adinatha. That is why one of the famous sutra of Hatha Yoga is Shri Adinathaya Namastu Tasya Yena Upadishta Hatha Yoga Vidya. That means it is the Adinath who gave, the Shankara who gave the Vidya. Vibrajane Praunnata Raja Yoga Arudham Icha Adirohiva. In fact, Hatha Yoga itself in the first mantra says that this Vidya given by Adinath Shankara will help me in arriving at Raja Yoga. So it goes without any doubt that Hatha Yoga is a preparatory stage for Raja Yoga. If we see Hatha Yoga's books are one of the most authoritative book is called Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a book of about 3 parts. This is the book called Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It is in Sanskrit, and this was written by Swa Atmarama Muni. That is considered as an authoritative text, although there are other texts like Amrita Sindhu, Dattatreya Yoga Sutra, because Dattatreya deity is also considered to be this Hatha Yoga deity. Viveka Markand is another book, Sharanga Paddhati, Shiva Samhita. So there are many books, of which Swatmaram Muni's Hatha Yoga Pradipika and Ghiranda Samhita in last 300 years has been written. These are the books used for Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga itself in the 3rd Adhyaya says, Raja Yogasya Mahatmam Kona Janati Tattvataha. Who doesn't know the greatness of Raja Yoga? So, in other words, Hatha Yoga clearly indicates that it is a way of creating the physical stability and strength in order to arrive for a Raja Yoga. So I believe this much is enough for us to avoid the confusion between Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Hatha Yoga will not be the subject of our discussion because it is not part of Yoga Darshanam that we are talking about. When we say Yoga Darshana, we are talking of Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga or Raj Yoga as coined by Swami Vivekananda. As far as study of Yoga Shastra is concerned, as of today, thanks to the arrival of Swami Vivekananda, the most ideal book to start, scripture to start, Granth is Raj Yoga by Swami Vivekananda himself. We can also source the same by having direct translation of Yoga Sutras by different people, Western as well as Eastern. And we will observe in the whole thing one important thing, why so many bhashyams are written on it. For example, there is a Vyasa Rushi, not the Vyas to be confused with the Vyas of Mahabharata. Vyasa Rushi has written Yoga Bhashya. It is a commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, also considered to be a standard commentary. One of the most enlightened Rishis, Vachaspati Mishra, we must have heard the name also. He has written Tattva Vaisharadi, which is also a book on Bhashyam of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. There was a Bhoja Raja in 12th century who has also written Raja Martanda, a scripture or a book, a grantha on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And we all must have heard of the name Vijnana Bhikshu. He has written Yoga Bhashya Vartika. He has written a Vartika, not Bhashya, Vartika. So all these are basically talking about the Patanjali Sutra's exposition. Now the question comes, why should we not study Patanjali Yoga Sutra directly by reading Patanjali's Yoga Sutras only and not the Bhashyams? And the answer lies in the word itself. The word says Patanjali Yoga Sutram. Sutram means it is written in sutra style. What is a sutra? Sutra actually means a thread. Now, what do you by thread? By following the thread, you reach somewhere. That means it is presupposed that you know how to follow a thread. So for sutram, because thread means it's a very thin thing, but definitively leading to something. In other words, Patanjali Maharaj in 185 odd sutras has given the secret of Ashtanga Yoga or a Raja Yoga in a very cryptic manner. But when he is written in cryptic manner, knowing fully well that it is a darshana, which for centuries will be followed down the line, and he himself being the Devatulya Rishi, the sutras are always supposed to follow a certain direction. In fact, the definition of sutra is Alpaksharam asandigdham saravat vishwato mukham astobham anavadyam cha sutram sutravido viduhu. What do you mean by Alpaksharam? First thing is it has to be concise or precise. One comma also will not be extra in the sutra, then only it is called sutra. One comma, one word, one alphabet, one halant will not be extra in the sutra. In other words, you cannot ignore anything in Patanjali Yoga Sutras as extra. Second, asandigdham. Asandigdham means unambiguous. That means every word of Patanjali Yoga Sutra has a definite meaning. There is no sandigdhata into it. You may have elaborate explanation on it, but what he wants to say, there has to be no, it is unambiguous. There is no ambiguity there, asandigdham. It is saravat. Saravat means essence. Patanjali Yoga Sutras are essence. It is a dried earth of whatever is there. That means when we study Patanjali Yoga Sutra, alone sutras we cannot study. We need a bhashyam for the help. We need other rishis for the help, because the sar is something which we cannot digest. It has to be further diluted and explained to us. So saravat vishwato mukham. Vishwato mukham means whatever is written in Patanjali Yoga Sutra is applicable for all. And when I say all, It does not say Hindu, Muslim, Christian, or any religion, or any person, any gender, any age, nothing, no discrimination. Vishwato Mukham. It is applicable. That is why Swami Vivekananda says, you don't require Shraddha for yoga. Even if you don't have, just read, correctly understand and follow, you will get the results. Shraddha is required in abstract entities because that is where the things are not yet in our hand. The difference between Yoga Darshanam and other Darshana is, the sadhana meant on other Darshana, we have to completely have faith that one day I will get this because it is written here, I will get it, and then till the time we arrive Arudha at the stage of Brahmananda, the sadhana keeps continuing. That's why during the journey, it could be replete with lots of doubts, stenya, samshaya that can come. In case of Yoga Shastra, as we start undertaking it, if not all, some results do trickle. The trickling of results starts right away. That is why one of the attempts while we are studying the Yoga Shastra is, we are not going to study only as a theory, we want to understand it and start practicing right away. So that is why when we come to pranayama, we are going to practice pranayama ourselves. It is for every individual to practice it as per his capacity and as per his understanding. But what is it? This is not a shastra where only Shravanam is going to work. The Shravanam has to be ultimately led to Mananam and practice. We have to work on it. That is why Vishwato Mukham, Astobham. Astobham means there are many mantras where you will have some amount of additional alphabets being inserted. Somewhere ha, somewhere hu. Astobham is not one extra, non-alphabet is also there. So you will not find any extra non-alphabetical or alphabetical thing in the sutras. Anavadyam cha. Anavadyam means this is most important part of the sutra. Avadya means refutable. We can prove that it is wrong. A sutra has to be anavadyam se, unrefutable, non-refutable. And that is why Patanjali Yoga Sutra absolutely fits into it, so much so that when sutra as such are being taught, it is said that the most ideal sutrakar was Patanjali. So we are dealing with one darshana, 185 sutras of absolute, precise, concise nature, unambiguous, applicable throughout the world in the essence form, and which are absolutely non-refutable. That is why Patanjali Yoga Shastra is to be studied with reference to other rishis and swamijis who can explain it better, and then we'll be able to understand it better. Another thing about this particular yoga, Ashtanga Yoga or Patanjali Yoga or Raja Yoga, is Swami Vivekananda himself has said, and we have to then completely believe in it, have faith in it, and that is, it needs long time and constant practice. Vyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha gruyate. This is again the cacophony, the same, the echo you see in Swami Vivekananda saying. Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga is a matter of practice, one. The practice has to be very long because it is a long and arduous journey, and it needs constancy in the practice. Did it for a month, then left it, that is not the way to move forward. It has to be taken to the logical culmination. It also presupposes two things, and this is where Swamiji's comment about the body and the mind comes. When the Raja Yoga or the Ashtanga Yoga practice starts, prior to the practice, the Shariram has to be sudrudha and susthiti. Because only when, as Swamiji says, only when the body is controlled, then the mind can be controlled. Now this sounds little contradictory because normally we are used to the fact that, oh, it is the mind who controls the body. The fact is, It is the mind controls the body, which is an absolutely correct statement, truthful statement. But since people like us, we are into the Sharira Vishwa, body is the ultimate thing for us. Mind has not expressed its full potency at all in our case. We use mind to its minimum for the sake of this body to interact with the world. So that is why body is the major thing with which we work. Mind is a very small functioning apparatus at the moment. So till the time the mind is not evolved like a yogi, when mind takes 99% of the control and the body remains 1%, at that point of time, the care of body may not be required. So that means there are two sthitis. In the beginning, before you start entering into the path of yoga, the shariram adyam khalu dharma sadhanam. We have to take this way because Swamiji has given the example also. He says, when we are angry, we have a problem with the mind as well as with the body. So when the body is diseased, mind cannot be active and very, very active. When the body is feeling sloth, lethargic, the mind also and body feels lethargic, heavy food. The gluttonous person cannot be a yogi. Why? Too much of food will take care of too much of attention of the body. When that happens, the mind cannot be in the state that is required for the yogi to start the exercise. That is the reason why the Pratak Kala and the Sandhya Kala is supposed to be the best period for sadhana. Why? Because that is the time when the body is having least possible function. The digestive system is not under the pressure of digesting tons of food that we eat, which is not required. Also, it is not tired because it is refreshed from the sleep. It is not involved into the worldly activity because the world is still sleeping. Chitta Vritti are in the Ulhasita condition. They are in a finer condition. And that is the time because the mind is in its best possible state, it can further be acted upon for the further journey. That is why only when body is controlled, mind control is attempted, this in the beginning, and only when the mind gets completely controlled, then perhaps the bodily control doesn't remain that important. That is why Swami Vivekananda says, have sattvika food in the beginning. But for the realized soul, Gurudev himself was very fond of pickle and papad. We should not immediately say, oh, that means that Hamla Katava, whatever is said in Bhagavad Gita, Gurudev was not following. This would be the highest stupidity. For the realized soul, the mind being under control, body is not a very important issue. Swami Vivekananda used to eat non-vegetarian food, but he advocated vegetarian food for the sadhaka. Why? Because in the initially, the mana mind, we are going to see how the mind is made. Unless that mind has been working on sattvic food, it will not be of any significance to us. So much about the Raja Yoga, which works for adapting the mind for the Antar Vishwa. And about mind, we saw certain very important aspects of the mind. Mind is the mutual preceptor of external and internal world. It's a bridge. We saw that. Second is, mind can go outward and mind can go inward. Now, we should not mistake inward meaning memory. Memory is also the part of external world. Object-less remembrance is smriti. When you see something in front, you interact with that thing that you see, and later on what we saw, you reflect on it. That is smriti. Retention of idea, retention of what you have done, the sanskara, and replaying those sanskara is smriti. So that again becomes a part of the Bahya Vishwa. So in other words, most of the work that we do, mind does, is on the Bahya Vishwa. So it can be focused outward or it can be focused inward. So mind has this ability to focus either way depending upon whom, not on the mind, because mind is under me. I go under the mind because of habituation. So if I have to withdraw my mind from the Bahya Vishwa and bring it towards the Antar Vishwa, which is the beginning of the sadhana, that is why the characteristic of mind is it can go outward or it can go inward. Second is the mind can focus multi-point or single point. We are seeing the characteristics of mind, and all these are important because we are coming towards the work on the mind. The Ashtanga Yoga is nothing else but working on mind. It can be multi-point or single point. What do we mean by that? Mind can focus on one thing, then focus on another thing, then focus on another thing. So every time it can flit between one point to the other point to the other point to the other point. This is one part. Mind, in the ordinary circumstances, mind focuses for whatever small period on one point only. If you are listening, you will listen. But simultaneously listening, seeing and tasting doesn't happen. If you are eating in front of TV, something interesting is going on, the eyes, through eyes the mind works, but rasana doesn't work. Why? Pata hi nahi padta hai kya khaya. One point concentration is not there. The reason being, it has, at one time, it cannot attach to multiple points, multiple interaction points. I'm talking about what Swami Vivekananda has said. In case of a yogi, because he controls his mind, he is able to apply his mind at one time on multiple things. What do you mean by that? What I mean by that is, a yogi can use all the panchendriyas simultaneously. So he can hear, he can see, he can taste, he can smell simultaneously. Why? Because the mind is developed that way. How do you develop that mind? It goes through the three processes. The first erroneous process that we are used to it, our mind is in a very, we are going to see those mind conditions also as we see Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. But our mind, normally what happens? It attaches to an object, then comes out of that object, goes to another object. So we are in the process of what is called as a flitting attention. We keep on flitting. Our mind keeps on flitting. Kshana Bhangurata. For a very small point of time, it stays there. So we keep changing ourselves. Our mind tosses. In the process of going towards Antar Vishwa, this tossing has to be stopped. So for stopping the tossing, the mind is pulled back from this tossing and kept at one point for a longer period. So let it get attached, but to one thing. And this we do in our daily practice. Dhyan laga ke padhai karo. What is that? Focus your mind only on what you are reading. A scientist focuses on the experiment and comes out with a new discovery. These are all nothing else but the concentration. We say, ab mujhe disturb mat karo, main khana kha raha hu. Because I want to focus on what I'm eating. So first thing is to withdraw the flitting mind and then bring it to one point, which is ekagrata or concentration. Once the concentration is developed par excellence, then the mind becomes expert in again going back to different objects, but in a different way. Now the mind is able to attach to all the subjects simultaneously. One is one mind moving from object A to B to C to D. This is what we are used to. Second is focusing mind only on point A. And the third stage is mind is so developed that ABCDE simultaneously it attaches to and gives the information. It is able to process the information, able to cognize all the five things simultaneously. That is called as developed mind. So that is how the mind goes through these different stages. Also, another characteristic of mind is it can either be present or it can be absent. What do you mean by that? A mind gets involved into the external world through the indriyas. But there can be a situation where the mind is not at all involved in any functioning. This is very important. Why it is important? It indicates that mind can be annihilated. Mind can be made smaller, smaller, smaller and destroyed, which is called as amana avastha. One is mind in the Bahya Vishwa, our avastha. Second is mind which is full of concentration. Then it elevates itself. It is called Unmani avastha, Utmana, upward going mind. One which is elevated, which is high, higher mind. And then third, Amana avastha, mind is not there. That means mind can be present or mind can be absent. This is another characteristic of mind. Another beauty of mind is mind can examine mind. There is nothing else in our body which can examine itself. Eye cannot examine eye. In fact, eye cannot see its own eye. Eye cannot see eye. Ears cannot hear itself. Why? Because it is a medium to see something else other than that. Indriya can see everything, can do everything other than itself. Mind is the only Indriya which can work on itself. So, in simpler words, we can also use a statement, mind can mind itself. So that means, since mind can examine itself and mind can work on itself, the beauty is utilized for exploiting the mind's characters. I'm talking about mind's different characters because these are exploited in the Yoga Sutras. When we start examining the mind by mind, it reduces its size. Mind examining mind reduces its size, and slowly such a mind moves towards destruction. So when you mind the mind really minds it and starts dissolving itself. This is another characteristics of mind. When the mind is single pointed, it concentrates. Single pointed is concentration. It completely gathers its entire potential capacity into one point, which is huge and enormous. That is why such a single pointed mind has a capacity to shake the foundation. Swami Vivekananda uses the word blow. It can blow the internal Vishwa and make it open for us. That is why only single pointed mind can help us to attain the knowledge. And the last and the most important characteristic of mind is, it is the only means of knowledge. In other words, whatever you may do, the only way to achieve knowledge is through mind. It is, the knowledge is beyond mind. That's fine. The question is, a ladder is required to go to the upper floor. Afterwards, you may throw the ladder, not a problem. But ladder is required to go to the upper floor. In the same manner, the mind is the instrument through which, by working on which, we can go beyond the mind. Discard the mind after using the mind for walking beyond the mind. So these are the different characteristics of mind which are completely utilized for the purpose of Raja Yoga. Minutest observation of the mind, then practical working on the mind so that the mind is trained as an instrument to explore the Antar Vishwa, is the yoga called Ashtanga Yoga. It may sound very easy that we are going to work on mind, but the practical way of working on mind is not that easy. And that is why Swamiji said it requires very long time and a constant practice. Why? The reason why it requires long time and constant practice is, this mind is used in a particular manner for umpteen births. Millions of births, I used my mind in a particular fashion. So for me to shade those samskaras, for me to shake off those impressions that I have received on this mind, I have to, even in normal vyavahar, if you want to make it straight, we have to keep bending it in a reverse direction, because it has bent, it has gone in some direction in a wrong way, we go into the other direction. If that is the case, then in that case, the work has to be of a longer period. One. Second is, It depends upon how much the mind is habituated to the wrong practices. How do we know that? We know that by knowing the guna that is existing in us. For example, a tamoguni person wants to start the yoga. Naturally, he is going to take far longer time. What is tamoguni mana? Tamoguni mana means the mind that is attached to the Bahya Vishwa for a very long period. What is Rajoguni mana? A Rajoguni mind is the mind that is attached to the external world, but at least it is active. It is using the force, but too much of force into the external world. But when it comes to Sattva Guni mana, the mind that is dominated by Sattva, in that case, its attachment towards the external world is not so firm. So it becomes easier to release those attachments and make the mind work towards the Antarvishwa. That is why even with Sattva Guni mana, it requires sadhana. For that matter, the scriptures say that do not come towards the sadhana unless you have purified your heart. Heart means what? Mind, the buddhi. So purer the buddhi, sattva guna pradipta buddhi is the more conducive buddhi for, it is like this. Mind is like a sword. If the sword is rusted, tamoguni, then the first thing is to remove the rust that we have, and then you sharpen it and then you use it. A rajoguni is, there is an age in it. May not be very sharp, but there is an age in it. But what is happening is, it is not getting applied to the target. It is constantly getting applied to everything else other than the target. But in case of a sattva guna, the age is sharp. Now you can start using it. That is the difference. And these three different states of mind depend upon what guna is predominating. Guna depends upon what karmas we have done. Karmas depend upon what we have done in the previous life. And that is how our prarabdham will come. In fact, if you are too much into tamoguna, the very fact that mind will be so dull that you will not think of even Ashtanga Yoga. As a corollary, if we are trying to study Yoga Shastra, it means that we definitely have done some sukruta, some punya karma in the past life, so that we feel like studying, one, and two, we want to understand and work upon it. That means the God's blessings, or Lord's blessings are already with us. So there is definitely an element of Sattva Guna in us, which is making us. So if Sattva Guna is there for us to bring up to this point, then we can definitely explore the possibility of the Sattva Guna in us by understanding what is given in the Yoga Shastra. That is why this is the Purva Pitika, the background that we need to know about the Ashtanga Yoga Sutra. Proper sutras we are definitely going to start. We will be taking a recourse to certain important books for these sutras. Main book that we will refer, of course, will be of Swami Vivekananda, because no one has given Raja Yoga or the Ashtanga Yoga the high pedestal the way Swamiji gave. So we will definitely be using it. We will also refer to Swami Shivananda for this particular to know a little more about it. What I am trying to do is also refer to Patanjali Yoga Sutra by the Kaivalya Dhama. So this is where the Kolananda Swamiji has written about this Yoga Sutra. Also, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, as mentioned in the books of Indian philosophy. So Bharatiya Tattvajnan Grantha, whatever are there, I'm trying to refer to that. We also have also tried to refer, not very much, but definitely trying to read about Light on Yoga by Iyengar, because he was the one who tried to practice the Hatha Yoga part as well as Patanjali Yoga Sutra. To what extent, I do not know, because I have not interacted with him. But his book called Light on Yoga and Light on Pranayama, these are two important books. They are bestsellers, etc. That is not our concern, but trying to see what is there. Yoga Vasishtha is another important book where it is referred. There is also cryptic references in Upanishads. Shvetashvatar Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, most of the Upanishads, there is an indirect reference. Wherever required, we are trying to take we are trying to pick and choose from there. And then, basing on these books, we are trying to make the sense out of this Yoga Sutras. The focus will be to see that the explanation of sutras helps us in practicing the yoga the way it is expected in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So it is not going to be a more abstract talk. Even now what I spoke was more or less still abstract. But as we start with the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, we all will realize that we are talking more practical. And every sutra becomes immediately relevant to our life. Discussion about Brahmapada, discussion about Atma, discussion about the Panchamahabhutas, these all sound a little abstract to us because we intellectually try to grasp it, yet from the experience point of view, Anubhuti point of view, it is quite distant to us. This feeling will not come when we see the Yoga Sutras in detail, because there will be a direct relevance and some contact point can be made with our daily practical life. So from the next session, we will first try to see why we should be studying Patanjali Yoga Sutras and how is it that by just concentrating on mind or by concentrating the mind on certain things, why is it that the knowledge becomes available to us? And another thing, why by just controlling something which is not even cannot be seen or dissected, an instrument called mind, how is it that I can control the entire manifested universe? I do not have any physical control on the manifested universe, but the entire universe bows to me. That much control I can get on the entire universe just by working on an instrument called mind. How that is possible? Why should I believe in it? How can something which is not even seen, something which cannot be deciphered, called mind, if mastered, can make you the king of the entire universe, entire creation and beyond? So that is what we will try to see in the next session in the beginning. And after that, after about say 15-20 minutes of this particular explanation, we shall start with the individual sutras and their meanings and the details thereof. While studying Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it goes without saying that, as Swamiji Vivekananda says, Patanjali Yoga Sutra is entirely based on Sankhyas, Sankhya Tattva Jnana. We have had a small Bhagavad Gita session about Sankhya philosophy. So every now and then the Sankhya will be coming in between. So simultaneously with Yoga, Sankhya will also be known to us, because Yoga and Sankhya, in fact, they are not considered even separate by some people. Yoga is called Seshwara Sankhya, Sa Ishwara Sankhya. That is the only difference between Sankhyas and the Yoga. There are other minor differences also, but the major difference is Sankhya does not have Ishwar, Yoga has Ishwar as a Karta. Other than that, there is no difference. But the philosophical input for Yoga is coming from Sankhya. So Yoga is a horse which is trotting forward towards the control of mind, keeping the Sankhya rider on its body. So Sankhya and Yoga always go together. So we shall always be discussing during the sutras about the Sankhya. And needless to say, our main methodology that we normally adopt, which is Advaita Tattva Jnana, will always be replete, because Swamiji himself is speaking. Swamiji was Advaitic philosopher par excellence. So when we go forward, Advaita also will be forming a part of it. With this, I believe we will be mentally prepared to receive the Patanjali Yoga Sutras in toto. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Okay. I want to ask Sanjay that out of the 6 Nyaya Shastras which he mentioned, the Mimamsa is divided into Purva and Uttar. But some people consider Mimamsa as one Nyaya Shastra, and the 6th one is considered as Vedanta, which is by Veda Vyasa Rishi. So how is that different?
No. I think there is some mistake. Vedanta is not a darshan. Vedanta itself, by word Vedanta means truth, and it's that which comes at the end of the Vedas. So we have Brahman, Samhita, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. So Upanishad is Vedanta because it is coming at the end of the Veda. And Vedanta also means that which ultimately tells you the essence of Vedas. So that means Vedanta is referring to Upanishada, and the Tattvajnan emerging out of Vedanta is Advaita Tattvajnan, while some people consider even Dvaita also comes from there. So it is the same Upanishads which are taken as a basis by Ramanuja and Madhvacharya to talk about Dvaita and other things, or Vishishtadvaita, Kevaladvaita, Advaita, Shuddhadvaita, etc. So Vedanta is a separate thing. And Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, the darshanas are only 6, Shad darshanas. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa. As far as Purva Mimamsa is concerned, there was a time when there are some people who consider both the Mimamsas as one. So Mimamsa was split into 2, one by Jaimini Rishi as Purva Mimamsa and one Badarayan Rishi as Uttar Mimamsa, only in the later stage. The reason between the two is Purva Mimamsa is entirely focused on Vedic rituals, to an extent that Jaimini Rishi says that if there is no karma, Vedic karma, it cannot be Veda. That is why he has ridiculed the Mahavakyas. Jaimini Rishi, Mimamsa, there are 3 important Rishis: Shabaru Rishi, Kumaril Bhatta, and Jaimini Rishi. Out of which Jaimini Rishi has criticized even the Mahavakyas, saying that these are all rubbish things because they do not talk Tattvamasi. Where is the action in this? There is no action, there is no karma, there is no yajna. So that is useless. So Purva Mimamsa entirely focuses on rituals, and through rituals, by applying the Vedic mantras and rituals, how you can reach the same stage or the Ishwar. While case of Uttar Mimamsa, it talks about non-ritualistic things, and that is the reason why it has given Mulya and Maryada to Purva Mimamsa, that means rituals, but the focus is mainly on the philosophical part. So when we say Advaita, Advaita is the Tattvajnanam that is coming from the Upanishads at the essence of philosophy. And that is why Uttar Mimamsa happens to be the source of Advaita Upanishad. That is why many times Uttar Mimamsa is called as Advaita. There is also a thing. But technically speaking, if we see Uttar Mimamsa, he is talking about Advaita philosophy coming from Upanishads. All the darshanas are talking about Upanishads by their own understanding. So when it comes to Vaisheshika, they will talk about atomic particles and particle. That is why they are Kanada Rishi propounded it. Nyaya, only through Tarka, they say Veda is nothing but Tarka. So Pramanam is their mainstay. In case of Sankhya, they talk only about Purusha and Prakriti. And in case of Purva Mimamsa, they talk only of rituals. In case of Uttar Mimamsa, we find gradual development of thought. Like, for example, in Sankhya, Purusha and Prakriti has been described in the most beautiful manner. However, what is the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti? Sankhya failed to mention it. That gap has been bridged in Uttar Mimamsa, in Advaita, by the concept called Maya and Vivartavad. Then Paramarthik or Trisatta Siddhanta, Maya Siddhanta, all these came in Uttar Mimamsa. So Uttar Mimamsa is the culmination in Darshana. That is why if we see the lineage of Darshanas, the last that comes is Uttar Mimamsa. Hari.
Sanjay ji, 2 thoughts very quickly. One is the mind, the way it's being referred to looks like it is a combination of man and intellect. Is my understanding correct? Because the characteristics you defined were both of man, like mind can examine the mind. In my mind is the man being observed by the intellect. Is my understanding correct in how mind is being referred to in Patanjali Yoga Sutra?
No, when we refer to the mind, we are referring to Antakarana. Antakarana means it is an abstract entity which is supposed to be a functional entity which takes a shape depending upon the function. So when Antakarana takes a particular function, it has a particular name. So that means Antakarana's name changes from Mana to Buddhi to Chitta to Ahankar. It is the same material, but it takes the name depending upon the function it performs. So when it is performing the function of Samshaya Vritti means Vikalpa, Sankalpa Vikalpa. That time it is called Mana, mind. When it is definitive about what it is going to do, Nishchayatmaka Vritti, it is called Buddhi. When it is trying to retain what has been decided, it is called Chitta. And when it has change in thought forms, it becomes as me and my thought, Ahankar. So Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankar, these are fourfold functional stratifications of the same structure called Antakarana. Now the question is, when we say mind, Mana, in general, Antakarana is commonly referred as Mana. But specifically mind does only Sankalpa and Vikalpa. So when we say we are going to work on mind, we are going to work on Antakarana. When we say we are going to work on mind, it's not only on Sankalpa, Vikalpatmaka Mana, we are also going to work on everything. And that is why we are, and amongst the four, what we will be using more, we will be using Nishchayatmaka Vritti more, that is Buddhi more. So we will be making certain concrete functional decisions. Decisions itself means the Buddhi will be coming into the picture. That is Buddhayatva Agraya. In Kathopanishad, we say that the penetrating Buddhi only can see the Atman, because mind, when it is concentrated and comes to a decisive faculty, it becomes Buddhi. So whenever we are talking in loose terms as we are going to work on mind, we are going to work on Antakarana. That is the meaning of it. Mind is used in a broader sense when we loosely refer it. In stricter sense, it is Sankalpa Vikalpatmaka Vritti.
Anju, you had a question?
Yeah, Hari Om Sanjay ji. Sanjay ji, in your previous lecture on Sankhya Yoga, you had, when you explained deductive and inductive logic, you said like Sankhya presupposes there is one Brahman. And even in today's lecture, we say that Raja Yoga is dependent entirely on Sankhya. We also understand Sankhya is the philosophical part, Raja Yoga is the practical. But I also understand that nowhere in the 195 sutras, the word Brahman is used. I find that very weird. Can you please throw some light on this? Hari Om.
Again, the reason why when we say Brahma, again, in case of Sankhya, the word itself is not there in Sankhya philosophy. The Brahman word is not there. Sankhyas refer to Purush. But the same Purush that the Sankhyas refer to is nothing else but the Brahman when it comes to Uttar Mimamsa. So in Sankhya, what we call as a Purusha, because Sankhya doesn't talk about Brahman, but the attributes given to the Purusha and attributes given to Brahman are same. For example, when we say Prakriti in Sankhya, there is no word called Maya in Sankhya. But in Advaita Vedanta or Uttar Mimamsa, same Prakriti becomes Maya. The reason, then the question comes, why they use the word Purusha and why here Brahman? The reason is based on the attribute that was given to that. For example, Purishete iti Purushaha. That means the one that gets embodied into all that is born is Purusha. That means the conscious Tattva, Chit Tattva is called Purusha. Now if you come to Brahman, Brahma means Bruhat. One which is Vibhur Vyapya, one which is all encompassing is Brahman. Now both are characteristics of both. Brahman is also Chetan Tattva, but then it is not called Chetan Tattva, there is called Brahman, because one characteristic is taken and developed as a concept. So, but when you come to the conceptual level, there is no difference between the two. In case of Sankhya's, what Purusha is, it is Brahman. In case of Advaita Vedanta, what is Prakriti there? It is Maya here. That is why you will see in most of the Bhagavad Gita discussion, the words are interchangeably used. Like Swamiji himself says, sometimes Purusha he says, sometimes Brahman he says. It is like that. However, the difference only is, in case of Sankhyas, they could not tell us that how the Purusha, which is so inert, which doesn't do anything, which is Nishkriya, Nirakara, how did it create Prakriti? Who created it? How did it come into existence? That question remained unanswered in Sankhya and got answered by Uttar Mimamsa, and Shankaracharya made that explanation further clear. That is where this Vivartavad and other Vada came, or what is called as Sat Asat Vilakshana Satta, his concept. These concepts are not there in Sankhya Tattvana. When we come to Patanjali Sutra Yoga Darshanam, in Patanjali Yoga Darshanam, the entire exercise is moving more and more towards the knowledge Jnanam part. Now, what is Jnanam? Jnana itself is the nature of Brahman. Jnanam is the nature of Brahman. Now, the question is, if you say Brahman doesn't have attribute, then how can you call Brahman is Jnanam? Again, from the point of view of understanding of ours, since we are in Ajnana, we have to presuppose that there is something called Jnanam. Actually speaking, Purusha or Brahman, there is neither Jnanam nor Ajnanam. Why? It is beyond that. But for us to understand, because if we say there is no day and there is no night, it is difficult for us to comprehend what am I trying to talk. Because I am used to darkness, I can say light. But imagine somebody who is only used to light, will he be able to understand what darkness is? So that is how, when we attribute it, that is why in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it is definitely based on the Purusha concept of Sankhya. However, being the practical aspect of the Sankhyas, all the sutras, as we go forward, we will see what is that he's talking when we go to Samadhi Pada. In Samadhi Pada, he's talking about all different kinds of Samadhi, and then the yogi reaches that stage. What is that stage we are talking about? In Nirbija or Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the stage where he reaches, what is happening to him? What is the situation about him? The situation is described in different words. In case of Samadhi, when it comes to Advaita, we say, oh, he becomes Brahmamaya. Because it's a name given, Brahmamaya. What do you mean by Brahmamaya? Brahmamaya means we have to at least give some name to that state, because that state is not describable. So in Samadhi, where you reach through Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that station has been described in some different word. In case of Sankhyas, what do they say? The moment you realize that you are a Purusha and not the Prakriti, and Prakriti Purusha are different, you attain Kaivalya. They have used the word Kaivalya. So there it is Kaivalya. In Advaita, it is Moksha. In Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it is Samadhi. So all these are nothing but the same status. Name is different. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti is this. Hari.
Thank you. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. You said that it will be more on, it will not be abstract, it will be on the practice part of it. So, do you require us to be in any particular preparation or throughout the week, or something is there, guidance?
Hari Om, when I say practical, what I mean means we actually certain things that are to be done. For example, see that if you want to practice pranayama, should be sitting in a particular position at a particular place, etc. It is not compulsory, but as a sadhaka, if you want to use simultaneously the whatever is learned for our own purpose, then one can start doing it, so that we start, for example, a pranayama, we can directly start practicing the way it is explained. First, we listen to the explanation, and then we start experimenting it. For example, if Swamiji says that at least twice or 3 times in a day we should be doing pranayama, we can start doing it. And the way he has explained it, we will start doing it. Now, some of the things are not, now, for example, pranayama can be done from tomorrow morning. Yes, today, right now also we can do it. But there are certain things which require some time to prepare. For example, Shariram. Now, if I say that the Sharir has to be in a Sudruda Avastha, tomorrow it is not going to happen, but we can start working on it. For example, we are going to talk about the diet of a yogi, the diet of the person who is following Patanjali Yoga Shastra. Now, if we get into that, we can immediately start changing our diet. It depends on our preparedness, mental, as well as our sattva guna, because we will be terribly attracted towards implementing that. Normal people say that, oh my God, how you're eating this food? There is so much variety in the world to eat. That is a Rajoguni Lakshana. But Sattva-guni person says that, no, I want to do falahar. Least meat anna, as less as possible. Not the extreme, not fasting and not gluttony, somewhere in between. Enough to sustain the body. So these advices will be coming as a part of the sutra discussion. We can start following it. That is what I meant by practically applying it. And for that, we need not wait for the entire treatise to get over and then I will start one day. We can start simultaneously also. Hari.
Sanjay, just one quick question. There is a criticism of samadhis and physical practices, saying that even all sarvikalp and nirvikalp samadhis come and go and they don't lead you to the truth at all. They don't lead you to any kind of realization. You come out of them and you are just the same as you were earlier. So that criticism is rests on the fact that only by knowledge and understanding can you change. So how do we reconcile this, Sankhya and the Yoga Sutras and yoga itself? Is as How do we get the conviction that this is something we should pursue and not just knowledge and understanding?
Hari Om. The very fact that we are trying to study the Samadhi Pada, it itself means the progress of mind from a flickery and wavery condition towards concentration, and the pinnacle of concentration is Samadhi. So the reason, this is entire thing is a journey. So that is why Samadhi is not the aim. Samadhi is a stage on the path. Although Samadhi is at a stage which is very close to the realization or the knowledge. In fact, it is the Samadhi is nothing else but intense meditation. Meditation has been prescribed in almost all the philosophical darshanas. Meditation, when it goes to a level where it transgresses the Samadhi and goes beyond the time and space, which is called as intense heat of white meditation, as Gurudeva calls it, that is the time there is a Brahma Sakshatkar, Atma Sakshatkar. What happens there, how it happens, and only Guru gets it done, etc. These are details, finer details. But Samadhi is definitely a penultimate stage, a stage. That is the reason why Samadhi, one who is Samadhistha, he gets the test of that Anandam, though for a short period. He again comes down. But this coming down is like scaling the Mount Everest and coming down so that one day you reach at the top. So that means it is a logical culmination of practice of concentration as advised by yoga to reach a stage. So that is why those who are criticizing these certain things about this, they are from Hatha Yoga. That is why Swamiji himself says that Hatha Yoga is, animals also live for 400 years. What do you want? Why do you want that? Or he says that Hatha Yogi never becomes sick. He says animals also don't become sick. Why is he become so castigating about Hatha Yoga? Is because that is not the purpose of Raja Yoga or Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga. Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, the aim has been given very clearly in 7th Adhyaya or Atma Samyama Yoga, that complete Karana Sah Dukkha Nivrutti is the aim of yoga. And Karana Sah Dukkha Nivrutti itself means knowledge. These are different names. Call it knowledge, call it Karana Sah Dukkha Nivrutti, call it Brahmibhut Hona, call it Brahmavid Hona, Atma Sakshatkar. These are all same things. So Samadhi has definitely an important role to play. How and why? That is our purpose of studying the Yoga Darshana. As we move forward, we will come to know what is the importance of Samadhi and how it becomes an inevitable station for a Raja Yogi to enter into. And for that matter, a Bhakti Yogi also, when he is not vibhakta from his deity, Tukaram Maharaj, when he was singing, or the Narsi Mehta, when he was singing the ballads of Krishna, they had already become Krishnamaya, they were already in Samadhi. So Avastha of Samadhi is the definition we are going to see that. that everybody experiences. So there is nothing threatening about samadhi. There is nothing mysterious about samadhi. And there is nothing mysterious or mystical about yoga itself, as Swami Vivekananda says. That is the most absurd interpretation of yoga. That is what Swami Vivekananda says. Hari Om.